This
Okay,
conference will now be recorded.
all right. So welcome. Those who are online, I don't see you at this point, so I'll be scrolling so you could see what I posted here. So if you want to speak up, feel free to speak up, but raising your hand or finger will not accomplish all that much. Okay, so today's topic is yeshiva students and the IDF, which is a very, very pressing, difficult conversation with very, very strong feelings on both sides. And as Jerry Seinfeld told the heckler as he was giving a performance in Australia, "Oh, you've solved the problem. That's the way to do it. Go after the Jewish comedians, and now the whole issue's been solved. And actually, we can take this and apply it elsewhere because there's an Australian comedian, he named him, who's giving some shows in New York. Why don't you go heckle him there, and that will solve the whole issue with Australia and the Aborigines who were there. This is great. So in a similar vein, I'm not going to solve the problem today, that's for sure. I myself, I have one son who learned in yeshiva in Israel for a number of years and had the patur, even though he was born in Israel, he used that exemption of learning in yeshiva and did not go to the army. And I have a son who is in uniform right now as we are talking. So what I like to do is present the different bases. All right, we like to use some texts, present the different bases for these different views, and a special thanks to Rabbi Chaim Jachter. The sources that I'm drawing on are he collected in his series Gray Matter, excellent series of books that deals on these different hot button issues, we can call it. They are available on safaria.org under Gray Matter, and I think it's about 5 different volumes there. And you could peruse through the table of contents, find something that interests you, and then you don't need me, right? But until you do that, I'm here. So we'll do some studying together. But a proper shout out to Rabbi Chaim Jachter. So, a little bit of background. Since the beginning of the state of Israel, Israel has granted military exemptions to full-time yeshiva students. That is not unique to Israel. I believe during the different times of drafts here in the United States, you had many people who decided they wanted to become priests, imams, rabbis, right? Because when you are, I believe that is American law, right? That if a person is studying for some sort of spiritual leadership position, then one does get an exemption. Okay, what is perhaps somewhat different and more challenging, and especially in our post October 7th world, is the amount of students who are getting this exemption now in Israel, and especially at a time where manpower is in demand and reservists, even reservists like my son, who's in his mid 30s, so they are being called up for extended periods of time. Right now, he's in for a week and then back at work for a week and then back in the army for a week. So the manpower issue is becoming very, very, very critical. A person might ask, should a spiritual person, right, serve in an army? Right? Is that where you want to have this spiritual person? Well, if you look at our history, right, we have many of our role models. We have Avraham. We'll soon see a Ramban and what he says about Avraham. Avraham went to battle famously in the Torah, we know, against the powerful 4 kings that had defeated 5 kings, and he went to battle against them in order to rescue his nephew Lot. Moshe led us in battle. Joshua led us in battle, and certainly David HaMelech, King David, right? That whenever we are offering any of our prayers, our tefillot, people always say, "What's the big deal about Tehillim, about Psalms?" All David did was copy our Siddur, right? Obviously, it's the opposite way around, right? Our Siddur is based all on the Psalms of King David, and he was a ferocious warrior in his early years under Shaul, under King Saul, and then as he was king, and it was only much later in years that his underlings told him, "Listen, you're getting a little bit on in years. I think you'll do more for us praying on our behalf than being out in the battlefield." But until that point, right, he would certainly be fighting battle. And the Gemara describes David HaMelech, King David, as saying that when he was studying Torah, he was soft and absorbing, but he was hardened when he went out into battle. So certainly we have our examples, our paradigms of our greatest spiritual leaders who were also as warriors when needed, right? Judaism, I think it's in Yemen where everyone has their ceremonial sword that they walk around with, right? By us, the Gemara says that it's not a tachshit. A person is allowed to wear certain ornaments, right, on Shabbos, even when there is no Erev, because I'm not carrying it, I'm wearing it. But weaponry is not an ornament for us. And therefore, when it's not necessary, we don't find in the Jewish society that you have these ornamental swords or sabers or things like that. As I think it's Yemen. I know an Arab country, everyone has their ceremonial sword that they.
The Sikhs, the Afghans.
Yeah. They have. So for them, that is an ornament of honor, right? And for us, it's an unfortunate necessity at times, right? But nevertheless, when it is necessary, then these spiritual leaders were all in. Not only those, but let's hear the first source, how the Rambam, Maimonides, in Laws of Kings 11:3-4, how he talks about the greatest of the holy people, Mashiach, the anointed one himself, that he should come speedily. And he writes there, Al Yalel Dat, we have it both in Hebrew and English, Laws 3 and 4. Al Yalel Daitcha, don't think to yourself, Shamelech HaMashiach Tzarech Lasot Otot Umoftim. He needs to do these wonders and miracles, Umechadesh Dvarim Ba'olam, and bring about new phenomena in the world, Umechaye Meitim, revive, resuscitate those who have died. Ein Davar Kach, that's not the case. Shari Rabbi Akiva Chacham Gadol Mechachmei HaMishnah Haya. That's an understatement. Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest Chachamim, wise men of the Mishnaic period. Voyanose Kelush Ben Kuziva, and he would carry the garments. What it says was great supporters of Ben Kuziva Hamelech Bar Kochva. Voyomer Alav, and he thought of him Shu Melech HaMashiach. He thought he was the Mashiach. He and his whole generation thought he's the Mashiach until he was killed. Right? Once he died, well, once he died and did not usher in the Messianic period, then it was clear that he was not the man. They did not ask of him any miracles, any signs, any wonders. Shatorah zod chulkeha umishvatel la'olam u'la'omei omim ve'im osivin alein v'lo gorin mehen. Continuing with the point he's making before, that it's not going to be, that the Mashiach coming is not going to be changing any of the laws. The Torah, its statutes and laws are everlasting. We don't add or detract from them. Next halacha 4, Vim Yamod, continuing over there, still in that first source. Vim Yamod Melech based of it. And if a king will arise in the house of David, Hogev Torah v'osik mitzvos, who is versed in Torah, involved in mitzvot, like David his father, Kafi Torah Shabiktav, following all of the parameters of the written Torah and the oral Torah, and he will push all of Israel, compel all Israel to follow those laws, and to strengthen its supports, milchamot Hashem. And what will this person do? Fight the battles of God. Then this is a Chezka Mashiach. Then we give him the assumed status of Mashiach. And then if he did this and succeeded and built the Mikdash, built the temple, and gathered the scattered of Israel, that will make him certainly a Mashiach, the Messiah, and he'll correct this world and bring the whole world to serve God together, as it says, etc., etc., etc. So we see that not just Abraham, not just Moshe, not just Yehoshua, not just David, but the Melech HaMashiach, what's he going to be doing? Fighting wars. He'll be fighting wars. Now, Chabad Hasidim, the Lubavitcher Hasidim, who many of whom thought, I think at a certain point everyone thought, but now once he died, there are those that do and those that don't, thought that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Mashiach. They understood this Milchamot Hashem, the wars of God, not in a physical manner, but in a spiritual level. But clearly, the words are fighting the wars, right? Warring the wars of God. Ramban, Breshit, this is when there's a pact that's going to be made together with Avram. So the Ramban there explains, and he writes, it is possible that Avraham was a very great and mighty in power, having in his household 300 men that drew sword, also many confederates, and he also that is valiant, whose heart is as a heart of a lion, and he chased after 4 powerful kings, as I mentioned before, and subdued them. When they, Avimelech and his team, saw Avram's success, which clearly was from God, the king of the Philistines was then fearful of him, lest he conquer his kingdom, since this would be easier than the war against the 4 kings. Perhaps the king of the Philistines had also heard the matter of God having given the land to Abraham. Hence, he made a covenant with him, making him swear that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, it being considered an act of falsehood if Abraham were to rebel against the king, and considering it possible that he might live until his grandsons would rule. He also mentioned that's why he mentioned my son's son. And as the fathers are, Ramban writes, so are the sons. Isaac, Yitzchak, was as great as his father, and the king therefore feared lest Isaac war against him, because he had driven him earlier from his land. Okay, so on one hand, we see that some of our greatest spiritual leaders, greatest tzaddikim, they were warriors. They were involved in battle. And it would seem clear that spiritual growth and spiritual connection and commitment is not a contradiction to being a warrior and fighting in the army. And I should have mentioned before, but I did not. In Israel, you have the Hesder Yeshiva system. Hesder actually means arrangement. And that is an arrangement that was made with the army. And these Hesder Yeshivot, which are more of the national religious bent, as opposed to a more Haredi, Hasidic or Litvish yeshiva bent. So there they have an arrangement with the army, this hesder, that they serve in the army. It's a 5-year commitment as opposed to the regular mandated 3-year commitment. These boys make a 5-year commitment, and it's a combination of studying yeshiva. Then they go as a group, mostly in the tanks division. They go as a group into the army. When they're in their army, their rabbis are visiting them regularly and giving them shiurim, and they are continuing with their spiritual growth and Torah study even while in the army. And it is a balance of months in the army, months back at the yeshiva. Like I said, over the course of 5 years, and I think about 2.5 of those 5 years are active duty in the army. The other 2.5 is time. I don't know how it splits exactly, but I believe around those lines. That's how it works. So what then is the model of this idea of this blanket exemption, right? For these, at this point, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, certainly tens of thousands of able-bodied young men who are in yeshiva, in the Haredi yeshiva world, and just get a set exemption from the army. So yes.
Was the exemption from the beginning of the state of Israel?
Yes, this exemption was from the very beginning, and it's part of Israeli law. There's much going on now about the law, right? Changing this, that, right? The story that I've heard is that when Ben Gurion came to speak to the Chazon Ish, who was the leader of the Haredi community, so the Chazon Ish, about this issue, the Chazon Ish quoted to him the Gemara that says that if you have 2 wagons that come and there's a hill, right? And one wagon is laden, right? And they can't pass. So someone's got to back up, right? One wagon is laden, the other wagon is empty. So then the empty wagon needs to back up to make and allow the laden, filled wagon to have the road. And he said, we are laden. We are coming with thousands of years of Jewish commitment to Torah study. And therefore, you have to make way for us. The argument that's made is at that point, we were talking about hundreds of students, right? At this point, we're talking about tens of thousands of students. Okay, but yes, come back to your original question, Monica. Yeah, that was from early on. Early on. Very good. Yeah.
And Rabbi,
Yes, Janet.
isn't the concept of milchevet mitzvah? So if we're
Janet, we're going
attacked,
to come to a lot of these points. We're going to come to a lot of these points.
all
Okay?
right, thank you. I'll move again.
Janice raised
Thank
an
you.
excellent point. She brought up the idea of a milchemet mitzvah, a war that is a mitzvah war, right? And we're going to see all about that shortly. The Rambam.
Rabbi, it's not muted,
Yes.
so please mute me. My phone didn't respond, so please mute me because there's a lot of background noise.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. I will do that. Okay. You have been duly muted. Okay. Okay. The Rambam speaks about the tribe of Levi, the Levite tribe. Now, the Rambam is talking here at the very end of the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. And this is how he describes the tribe of Levi. That is the bottom of on your pages, sorry. Yeah, where it says, towards the bottom of the first side, Rambam, Maimonides' laws of Shemitah, that's the sabbatical year, and Yovel, the Jubilee year, 13, 12, and 13. And he writes as follows. And I have it both in Hebrew and English, so follow as you feel most comfortable. V'lama lo zacha Levi b'nachalat Eretz Yisrael u'bebizata im echav. Why is it that the Levites, did not receive a portion of the land of Israel when it was divided up amongst the tribes? Levi did not receive u'bebizata and the spoils of the war along with his brothers. And he answers, Mitnei shehuvdal la'avod et Hashem. They were set aside to serve God. Lisharto, ulahorot rachav, and to teach, instruct God's straight ways and his mishpatim and his laws, hatzadikim, that are righteous, l'rabim. They are meant to serve as the spiritual leaders, teachers for the nation. Shenemar, as it says, Yoru mishpatech Yaakov v'toratcha Yisrael. They will teach your judgments to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. Lefikach, therefore, hivdilu midarkei ha'olam. Therefore, they are separated from the ways of the world. Lo orchim milchama kishar Yisrael. They do not wage battles like other Israelites. V'lo nochalin. They don't receive the land inheritance. V'lo zochin la'atzmam v'koach gufan. They do not merit for themselves. Right? They don't acquire through their physical power. They said, Elohim chel Hashem. They are the army of God. Shenemar Baruch Hashem chelo. V'hu Baruch Hu zochel lehem shenemar ani chelkecha v'nachalatzcha. I, Hashem says, I am your chelek. I am your inheritance. And then the Rambam goes further and says, V'lo shevet Levi bilvad. This is not restricted only to the tribe of Levi. Elokol ish v'ish, but each and every person, mikol ba'ei ha'olam, from the world, asher nidavarucho, that his spirit has moved him. Ve'ivino mada'o, and his mind has given him this clarity. Lihibadel, to separate oneself. La'amod l'pnei Hashem, to stand before God, l'sharto, to serve him, l'avdo, and to serve him, l'deyat Hashem, to know God, v'halach yashar, and to go straight, kamosha so halukim, right, as God has made us, uparak me'al tzavra ola cheshbonot harabim, asher bikshu b'nei adam, right, and he has cast off from himself the yoke, as English, of the many reckonings which people are seeking. Harezen nitkadesh. This person becomes sanctified, kodesh kadashim, with the Holy of Holies. V'yashem chelko v'nachalato, and God will become his chelek, his portion, nachala, his heritage, lo'olam v'olmei olamim, for all eternity. V'yizkalo b'olam hazeh, davar hamaspik lo, and he will merit in this world that which is enough for him, no guarantee of wealth, but one will have enough. Right, as was given to, as merited the Kohanim and the Leviim. Hare David, alav shalom, right? David himself said, Hashem minat chalki v'kosi ata tomich gorali. God is my lot, my portion, my cup. You support me. So there are those that say this is the paradigm. You see, it's not just the tribe of Levi, but anyone who's going to be dedicating themselves towards learning, towards Torah, towards spirituality, towards teaching, whatever they'll be doing. So they become like the tribe of Levi. And we saw in that was right, that we saw 12 and 13. In 12, we saw Levi does not go out to do battle. Right? So that is the source or the example, the paradigm that is set by many for having this blanket exemption that takes place.
So it's Rambam's derivation.
That's the Rambam.
That's kind of
That's
the
Rambam.
beginning of it.
Yes.
Rabbi, wasn't the guy that did a barbecue with Cosby and Zimri from Levy.
I mean Zimri.
Zimri. Oh, yeah.
Oh, Pinchas.
Pinchas.
Yes.
Wasn't he from?
Yes, but yes. So Ken is bringing up that when Zimri was committing an act of public adultery, he was speared, as was his partner, by Pinchas, who was from the tribe of Levi. Yes, but that
That's how he earned the
yes, but that someone will. There was a need for someone to act. Moshe was frozen, right? You can't use that, and therefore everyone needs to go to the army, right? That was a lone act. Yes, that was an act of a loner from the tribe of Levi. And I'm saying it's hard to say that will set the paradigm for the tribe. Yeah.
Why would he be given the covenant that he was given?
He was given the covenant of kahuna. He did the right thing, and he was rewarded for that. But to say that becomes the paradigm, you want to say that's a paradigm, and therefore they should go to battle, I think that's a bit of a stretch. David.
Well, why wouldn't it be? I mean, if he earned it by battle, and given the covenant.
What he earned was by acting with alacrity when everyone else was frozen. He right. That's what we see from there.
Doesn't constitute a battle.
Yeah.
Rabbi, during the Vietnam War, some of my friends were more cowardly than others.
I'm sorry?
Some of my friends were more cowardly than others, and so they wanted an exemption to get out of the draft.
Yeah.
According to this, how do we discern one's intentions, whether they're merely cowards? Or
Okay. So another issue that's going to that I'll bring up is it's become part of that society, the Haredi society in Israel, that you don't go to the army, right? It's gotten to the point that it's not so much that because you're in yeshiva you don't go to the army, right? Well, you're not going to the army, and therefore you need to sign up to be in a yeshiva, right? And there are those who are, as we say, steiging away, learning away, right? Totally applying themselves. And there are those who would really prefer to be getting some sort of a job and working. But if they do that, they have to go to the army. And to be fair, all right, an issue is that the army is the regular army is not necessarily the most conducive place for Torah and mitzvot. For Torah and mitzvot, there are a lot of things that go on there. There's a lot of temptations there. So many feel, rightfully so, that it's not an environment where I feel comfortable having my children who have grown up in a more Haredi, sheltered, very religious environment to be thrust into that. There has begun a number of years ago something called the Nachal Haredi, which is a group that was set up for boys from the more Haredi background, that the environment, it's not a co-ed environment, and there's time for davening and all these things. So there have been a lot of adjustments that the society is trying hard to find its way, right? But you do have those who are just afraid to go, and we'll soon see that in certain cases it might be better without them. Yes, Lev and then Dov.
Yeah, but it seems like it's all up to Rosh Yeshivas. They keep students who are there just to avoid conscription. And they don't say, I mean, it's not about students. Rosh Yeshiva would say, boys, we need to do it right now because of the war. the boys. will
Yes,
go.
but the Rosh Yeshivas don't feel that that's
No,
necessary.
That's kind of the issue, not the boys, but.
Well, yes, it's the entire society that has settled into this mode. And
But that doesn't, a little bit along this line. I mean, yeshivas are kind of grouped and they have maybe some chief Rosh Yeshiva of this particular segment of, do they speak out and state that, yes, we don't go to the army, or some of them say we do, or they're just silent and.
well, it's not a matter of speaking one way or the other. There are the national religious yeshivot, the Hesder yeshivot, where it's a given that army is part of that. And even in those yeshivot, you might have a handful of boys who are just such learners and so involved. Boys who are getting up at 6 or 5 in the morning and learning till 1, 2 in the evening, and just completely immersed. That even in the Hesder yeshivot, I believe you will often have a handful of boys that the Rosh Yeshiva will say, you just keep on learning, right? But it's not a matter of what the Rosh Yeshiva is saying, right? They don't have to say it. If I'm a Haredi yeshiva, then it's a given you're not going to the army. You're getting an exemption, right?
So what in the view of debate going on in society, they did not stand up and say, no, we are not going to the army. Some of Rosh Yeshivas, kind of on behalf of, I don't know, whatever Haredi yeshiva, they clearly express their opinion.
It's not a matter of expressing that. Yes, that's been, at this point, it's a given. If you're in a Haredi yeshiva, you're not going. If you're in a Hesder yeshiva, you are going, right? There's no point in any Rosh Yeshiva. If a Haredi Rosh Yeshiva is going to get up and say, I think all the boys should go to the army, he's not going to be in the Haredi yeshiva anymore. Or it's not going to be a Haredi yeshiva anymore. Right? In other words, we have very clear delineated camps in Israel when it comes to the yeshivas. And you're a black yeshiva, you're a Hasidic yeshiva on one hand, or you are a national religious, Dati Lu'umi yeshiva on the other hand. Yeah, Dati, yeah. There it's not really called modern, it's called Dati Lu'umi, national religious. Yeah. And which camp are you on? Which camp are you in? That'll determine the kippah that you wear, right? The kippah that you wear, the mode of dress, the garments that you wear. Are you wearing, a white shirt and black pants, right, with it seated out, or are you wearing more relaxed, right? Do you have a black velvet kippah? Right? Or do you have a kippah sruga? Right? There's very, very, I think tragically, very clear delineation, right, between these societies. So it's not a matter of, well, let this Rosh Yeshiva, that Rosh Yeshiva, right? Where has that Rosh Yeshiva gone through his schooling? Where are his hashkafot? Where are his views on all these things that we're discussing? And that's where they are, right? You have some who have switched. There's a Rabbi Natan Slifkin, who's a very vocal person, a person who has very vocally switched camps, and he writes often and slams the Haredi system as being untenable. Yeah.
Is there resentment between the two camps?
There's incredible resentment between the two camps. Incredible resentment between the two camps. Now, well, let's see a few more sources, okay? And we'll talk about. Yes, Dov.
So, the real special neshama comes to the world. This person is really gifted, has amazing brain. You just cannot put it into a different environment. You'll destroy his ability.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I said. There are certain, right, even amongst the Hesder yeshivot, there are certain boys who the Rosh Yeshiva, if I'm not an authority in this, if I understand correctly, there are certain that the Rosh Yeshiva will say, right, he should not leave the confines of the Beit Midrash. Isaac, Yitzchak, was offered as a sacrifice and never left the land of Israel, right? We have, yes. Okay. The Torah actually speaks about, I'm sorry, before we get to that, yes. So we have also the Rambam, right, who we just quoted about the tribe of Levi, but there is a halacha about the Yafat Toar. Yafat Toar is that if a beautiful woman is found at war, and I say that just as Janet walks in, amazing, right? Right? No wars here, right? A beautiful woman is found in war, right? So the Torah speaks against the Yetzer Hara, meaning, we know, or at least we've heard, we haven't been in war, about the terrible abuses that women are often subjected to in times of war and places of war. So the Torah spoke for the Yetzer Hara and said that if we're going to tell soldiers absolutely not, then there's going to be abuse that will take place. And therefore, there is a mechanism through which a person can take a woman, a Yafat Torah, a beautiful woman from war, but he can't take her and violate her and sleep with her. There's a whole 30-day process that they must go through, which ends up in a conversion process. But during that time, her nails are growing, her hair is growing, she becomes very unkempt. And the hope and prayer is that when he's no longer caught up in the passions of war, he's going to say to himself, what was I thinking? And send the girl back home. Okay? That in a nutshell, I don't want to get sidetracked with that, is Yifat Toar. But the Rambam writes, and this is Rambam Maimonides' Law of Kings 8:4, HaKohen mutar b'Yifat Toar. A Kohen is allowed to have these relations with a Yafat Toar initially. Shelo dibra Torah ela keneged hayetzer, because the Torah only permitted this as a concession to a person's inclination, right? Evil inclination. Aval eino yachol lisaena achar kach meshigioret. But there's another problem later on, that he can't fully marry her at a later point, because as a convert, a Kohen is not allowed to marry a convert. But what do we see from this Rambam? The Kohen, the tribe of Levi, is where? In war, in battle. At the same time, we started the book of Bamidbar a few weeks ago, and one of the first psukim is Se'uat Rosh Kol Dapnei Yisroel, take a census of the whole Israelite company by the clans of its ancestral houses, Lemishvichotam, Leveit, Avotam. Here's what we learn out, that the Judaism, that although the Judaism, the child being Jewish or not, is determined by the mother, which tribe is determined by the father, etc. Mi ben esum shana v'mala, right? Kol yotzei tzvav Yisrael tifkudu otam l'svatam atav arom. 20 years up, all those are able to bear arms, all those who go out to battle. And the tribe of Levi is not included in this tally. So, yet the Rambam speaks about Yafat Toar, that allowance, that battle allowance for a Kohen. So, it is hard to know exactly. Now, even the Rambam we said before about the Levi, right? But is he, when he says so to anyone else who wants that, is that also in terms of military exemption or not? That's not clear. Note he brings as an example King David, right? Who was such a person and would go out to battle. Okay, so therefore it's not, right? Again, the tribe of Levi is used as the paradigm, and there are different ways of looking at that. The Torah speaks about wartime exemptions. This is what that Janet you brought up before. So let's take a look at Devarim 20 verses 5 through 8. The Shotrim, the officer, will speak to the nation, saying, Miaish, who's the person who's built a new house, has not yet dedicated it, go back home, lest he'll die in battle. Next, who has planted a vineyard and is not yet harvested, go home. Who's the person who has Eras Isha, done the first stage of marriage, but has not yet reached the second stage of marriage, go back home. And they said, lastly, Mia Isha Yarei Varachalevav. Dave, you brought this up. Who is a person who is afraid and disheartened? Go home. Below Yimas Levav Echav Kilvavo. Let him go back to his home, lest the courage of his brethren flag like his. Right? In other words, you don't want him to create a panic. Right? When one person is panicked, right, that has certainly a very, very harmful effect on the courage, morale of all the others. Okay, the Mishnah in Babylonian Talmud, Sota 44b, goes through these exceptions, these exemptions, and fleshes them out further, but then qualifies it and says, Bamed Dvar Amurim, when do we have these exemptions? B'milchamot hareshut. That is in regard to elective wars. Aval b'milchamot mitzvah, when it is a war whose mandate is a mitzvah, we'll soon qualify that, explain that. Hakol yotzin, everyone goes. Afilu chatan mechedro v'kala mechupata. Even the groom from his room and the bride from the wedding canopy, right? All hands in, right? Groom and bride, actually, interesting. Men and women. And on that, the Rambam writes, that's Rambam Maimonides' Laws of Kings 5:1. The Rambam writes, Ein HaMelech nilcham tchila el milchemet mitzvah, right? A king will only begin any of his warring with a milchemet mitzvah. And what is that? Ve'ezohi milchemet mitzvah. What is a milchemet mitzvah? Zo milchemet shiva amamim, against the 7 nations that were there in Israel. Umilchemet Amalek, and the war against Amalek. The Ezrat Yisroel miyad tsar sheba aleihem, or to help Israel from an enemy which attacks them. That is Milchemet Mitzvah, and that everyone is in, and only after that can he get involved in any Milchemet Reshut, which is expanding the borders of Israel. But Milchemet Mitzvah, when we are under attack, right, that is Milchemet Mitzvah, there we have everyone in. Yes, Jen?
So an exemplar of that is when Moshe had to get assurances from Reuven and Dan that they would
And
cross God, that they would cross the border and fight. You know, that they were all in to conquer
Okay.
the 7.
Okay, yeah, right.
So that's a role model right there.
Yeah. It was all in, right? And Moshe's classic words were, "Are you going to stay here while your brothers go into battle?" Right? You know, and it was brought up before that this causes a lot of tension in Israeli society, a tremendous amount of tension in society, right? Because right, on one hand, the Haredi world, you know, puts out that it is, biyachad ninatseach. That is a big slogan now in Israel. On one hand, it can be biyachad. If we are united, then we can win, right? But the other biyachad ninatseach is, along with the boys who are fighting and the boys who are learning, together, that's how we will have the victory, right? But the boys who are learning, right, it's, they're not having funerals every week or two for one of the comrades in arms who have fallen who have fallen in battle.
And the
So-
boys who are learning are not doing the Levitic function of going out to army battalions and giving shireen.
That's not necessarily the Levitic function.
I mean, to teach.
Yeah, that's not right. Yeah. So
We just said that was part of, anyone whose heart moves them to.
yeah, to be involved in the spirit. At the same time, right, we'll soon see, we do have sources how it is the spirituality and the koach and the force of Torah that does animate and give strength to a nation, right? A point that Rabbi Slifkin often makes is, okay, you could have plenty of people who are under 18 and over 21 who are doing their learning, right? It doesn't mean that all these tens of thousands who are age 18 to 21 need to be, right? And a counter argument will be if you pluck them out at that point, then that will stunt their growth into Torah leaders, Torah teachers, certainly putting them into an environment that is very, very contrary. And the counter to that is, well, if enough of them would go in, then the environment would be that much more, um, that much more, um, that much more compatible and conducive, right, to who they are. Another couple of points. There
Rabbi
is a concept of osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. If I'm involved in one mitzvah, then I am exempt from other mitzvot.
Rabbi
And when
Ciner,
I'm exempt, I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to stay in the mitzvah that I'm in. So that is an approach that is given for these exemptions. They're osek mitzvah. Granted, protecting the land of Israel, protecting the Jewish people is a mitzvah. Osek mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. One who's involved in a mitzvah is thereby exempt from another mitzvah, and furthermore should not stop what they're doing. This is somewhat problematic, Rabbi Jachta points out, because that doesn't necessarily apply to Torah study. We don't say, "Oh, you're studying Torah, therefore don't go eat in the sukkah. Therefore, don't put on your tefillin. Don't say the Shema. Don't pray." Right? And so that's not as simple. Now, also, that when the mitzvah cannot be performed by someone else, so then you have to stop doing, right? When this other mitzvah is a passing mitzvah and it can't be done by someone else, stop what you're doing and do that other mitzvah. So that gets into the whole question, does the army really want them or not? Right? The argument has been made, and I think it was true for a while, actually the army does not really want all of these Haredi soldiers, right? It's a different mindset. In the army, right, you need to be told to do it and you do it, right? A yeshiva mind has been trained to, well, why? Well, I think it makes more sense to do it this way. The person who hears a question in the Beit Midrash, in the study hall, and hears an answer and says, I think I have a better answer, and you actually come up with a better answer, right? That's what yeshiva learning trains a person to do, right? Actually, one of the strengths of the Israeli army is that it's not all from the top down, but they will take, right? They will take recommendations and ideas from the soldiers who are out there and incorporate that, right? But so the argument has often been made that they don't want these Haredi soldiers. That's not what they're looking for in the army. That's not the whole spirit that there is in Sahal, right? I think with what's going on now and the realization, not just what's happening right now, but the realization that we have from October 7th, that we need more boots on the ground, that we can't just rely on the technology and the eyes in the sky and this, but we need to have the boots on the ground. I think there is a sense now that the Army feels that they very much would like these boys to be to have that added manpower.
Rabbi Ciner, I have a
I'm
question.
sorry.
This would
Rabbi
not be.
Ciner,
Correct. Correct. Just one second. Who's speaking?
Mark.
Yes, Mark.
So I have a question. So, um, would you say studying Torah is higher um, than than fighting in the army? Because fighting in
So
the
so
because fighting in the army is achieves a certain goal, uh, destroys Hamas. But studying and davening, it will help, but it's not. There's no direct link.
okay.
There's no
Okay.
direct link. You are
Okay, Mark.
fighting
I hear what you're saying, Mark. So a couple of things. We say as part of our morning blessings, we say the Talmud Torah keneged kulam. The study of Torah is considered a mitzvah that is equal to all of the mitzvot. It's of the highest. And those who are in favor of the exemptions, right, would say that this Torah and this tefillah is what powers the army and brings kedusha, brings holiness, brings God presence closer, and the more the closer we are to God's presence, the stronger we are, the more victories that we have in the field. Right? That's how they would counter that. Let's see the last two sources which do address to a certain degree that which we said. Let's see these sources. The Babylonian Talmud, Makot 10a. Amar Yeshua ben Levi, my dichtiv, omdot hayu ragleinu, b'sharayach Yerushalayim. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Our legs, our feet were standing by your gates, Jerusalem. He explains, mi garam l'ragleinu shiamdu b'milchama. What caused our feet to stand up in battle, meaning to be successful in battle? Sharei Yerushalayim. It is the gates of Jerusalem, shayu oskim b'Torah, where they were involved, osek, in Torah. That is what gave our feet the strength to withstand the enemies in war. And Babylonian Talmud again in Sota, interesting, they're both 10a. Darish Rav Nemat Nanash Asa. Asa was one of the great righteous kings of Judah who ruled for 42 years. But he was chole baraglayim, he became lame. Why is that? Rava says, when they sha'asa anagaria v'tamidei chachamim, because he made Torah scholars, he says perform forced labor, but that's how this English translates it, but typically is understood to mean soldiers out of them, right? What's that? Shenemar v'amelech aseh shmiya et kol Yehuda ein naki. This is when the king Basa had built this whole fortress from which he was going to attack. He was an evil Israel king, was going to attack this king of Judah, and he had everyone carry away all these stones once he was defeated. Right? So all means even the Talmidei Chachamim, right, were involved in that. Right? So those are sources, right, that are brought to show that you don't, right, that they are keeping this army going, keeping these soldiers going. Right? Rav Moshe has a teshuva, Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he says the government exemption, which you brought up before, that it's Israeli law, so that is recognition that someone who sincerely studies Torah deserves a draft exemption. So one, he says, who has a strong desire to learn Torah and become great in Torah scholarship should study in yeshiva and avoid the draft. Right? The issue again then becomes how many of those who are getting this exemption are truly fitting into this category. Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Gush Etzion Yeshiva, which was it was and is probably the Harvard of the Hesder Yeshivot, right? So he was very much, and Gush Etzion, the boys, it's a Hesder Yeshiva, the boys all go to the army as a religious and moral imperative. That's how he views it. Come back to what you had said before, Lev. Which camp you're in will determine, is it a given that you don't go, or is it a given that it's a moral and mitzvah imperative that you do go? Or is it a moral mitzvah imperative that you don't go? Right? It's not individual Roshei Yeshivas who are setting the direction. Right? So he says that these texts,
Why?
Mark, let me go a little bit, Mark, and then. So he says that these texts, right, if anything, would show that the government should not force the students to go, but that they should want to go himself, right? He views serving in the Israeli army as an act of chesed, right? And the Torah says, "Lo tamod al dam reyecha," don't stand idly by your brother's blood, right? They're helping to settle the land of Israel, right? Right. On the other hand, those who are choosing to study in yeshiva and are truly committed to dedicating themselves yomam v'layla, day and night, to the study of Torah, so they are right. So they feel that they are building the spiritual development of the land of Israel, and and their service, their study, and their tefillah, right, helps to protect physically the people of Israel. Just one of the point that he brings over here is that Rabbi Avram Sherman reports during his tenure as an army chaplain, he witnessed many observant Jews who abandoned Torah mitzvot after their experiences in the IDF influenced them negatively. Right? That is a reality, for many, and that certainly affects the decisions of many individuals and of a society which is really based to a great degree on sheltering themselves from outside negative influences. So, like I said, what I wanted to do today was present different Torah sources that are drawn upon by these two different camps, and how each interprets the others, and there are those that certain groups choose as being primary, and others choose the other as primary, right? When it comes to, like we said before, biyachad ninatseach, that we hope that together we will win, right? Certainly, anything that we can do to try to alleviate this discord and to bring about a workable solution where people are sharing the burden and appreciating all the different parts that people are that each are doing. Probably take Mashiach to get us to that point, but we try our best along the way to get as close as we can. Yes, Mark, you want to say something before?